Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining from across the world. The day two of the Deep Tech Innovation Alley. We welcome you, and we are on our journey to embark a collective action towards global collaboration, a journey towards a greener tomorrow, a journey towards changing the world through deep tech for a better world. Whilst the term sustainability and net zero turn us towards some global events happening today, who can forget the Paris Agreement of 2016, where 197 countries have pledged and committed to become net zero by 2050? Who can forget the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 strategies that are implemented worldwide by companies, by governments, by institutions, by startups, and of course by network science? So let me take this opportunity to introduce network science's unique concept of zero cost net zero, ZC and Z. And I could not find myself in better company than Mr. Madhvan, who happens to be our advisory board member. And I'm blown away with the term that he used to describe himself, servant leadership, the last point as it pops up in your screen. A technologist at heart, a business leader uh, as a person, and I should say a sustainability leader by soul. So, Madhavan, thank you very much for joining me, and we hope to gain a lot of insights and walk towards a greener and better future in the coming days.
Absolutely. Thank you, Prashant. That was a lovely introduction, and I'm very excited personally to see that this topic is gaining a lot more traction in the world, and obviously it's become a top agenda item for many organizations and executives alike. Obviously, this topic is also getting a lot of attention and focus from several boards across the world, and I think it should be. A better planet is something that is that is a responsibility, a collective responsibility of everyone, and contributing to that is not just something that is required for us today, but it is required for us to build a very sustainable and a better future for generations to come. Um, if you will, I think the world has been a little late into in getting on to the bandwagon out here, but then it's always better late than never. So I'm very glad to see the number of initiatives that's coming up across the board on this one. To that extent, a lot of folks tend to ask me. I mean, if part of my past transformation journeys tend to ask me, is this something that is purely a social responsibility, or is there a business behind it? Right.
Sure.
And what better way to address that question than to throw some numbers? Let's look at some interesting statistics out here, because it's multidimensional. Sustainability is no longer just an environmental save the planet initiative. If you look at the workforce that's emerging, the so-called millennials,
Mhm.
and the folks onwards, the generations onwards, there is a very deep commitment and an attachment to purpose amongst this workforce, which is very, very nice to see. And the latest statistics reveal that almost 70% of this workforce, the emerging workforce, care. They care for a purpose, they care for the planet, they care for being, and they're inspired about being part of a larger initiative, which is just more than business. And 70% is a significant number. It's not something that one can ignore. On the other hand, thanks to the push that's coming from many different angles, all the way from United Nations SDGs to boards mandates and things like that, almost the investments that are being plugged into, even in the fields of other research and solutions and things like that, there is a mandate that's coming to be socially responsible, to be sustainable. Almost 50% of the investments being made by many investors are now kind of mandating that the investments are aligned back to sustainability goals, which is a pretty significant number again. Move to the right out here, you would see that it is very surprising to see that the last couple of years, coincidental to be aligned with the pandemic, the number of proposals that we are seeing in the market for various transformation initiatives, almost more than 50% of them, is literally explicitly stating sustainability as a goal as part of the solution that's being proposed. Now, for all these wonderful tractions that we're seeing, we're still seeing a significant gap in terms of the investments and the funds that's coming in. The estimated gap in terms of investment that's required to enable this is almost 2.5 trillion. That's a staggering number, actually, right? So when we look at the entire picture of sustainability, while net zero is almost becoming an important mandate for everyone, the lack of skills, the lack of technology, and the lack of investments is almost making this initiative a non-starter with most organizations. There are a number of use cases that one could target as far as sustainability is concerned. There is about carbon footprint measurement, there is about emissions, there is about process efficiencies, there is about reporting and compliance. Number of things are important in this context, but who is equipped to do it? Where is the technology to do it, and where is the investment to do it? Which kind of makes a lot of organizations, including network science, to think what would be a better way to target the net zero with hopefully a zero cost model. It's very important to be practical about our aspirations. It's one to be aspirational about a better future. It's another to be practical about it. So, when we reflected deeply, talked to several executives in terms of, how do we set this flywheel in motion? We have to start somewhere and then we have to set the flywheel so it kind of orbits into the next stages fairly quickly, but fairly practically. That's where network science kind of landed into this concept called ZZNZ, the zero cost net zero approach, where we firmly believe that if we are able to start our initiatives with our customers, by collaborating with them on identifying the areas where operational efficiencies can lead to a lot of cost takeout, that kind of opens out the ability to fund these initiatives and the ability to kind of set the flywheel in motion, take those investments and the savings, plug them back into investments by automating processes, digitizing processes, optimizing our energy sources and things like that. In other words, go more towards process efficiencies and sustainable practices. That leads to better business, that leads to better profitability because the business is by nature efficient than before. Apply deep tech into creating alternate models. We are all biased by our own existing ways of working, right?
Yeah.
For example, I was working with one of the automakers, and they were saying it takes several $1 million to do a huge crash testing course. Now it is found out that more than 60% of that can be digitized. Now it doesn't really allow you to just completely automate the entire thing and digitize that. That's not possible, but then do it where possible. So apply technology to take to next gen business transformation and make all of that to lead to environment sustainability, but aligned to the business and financial goals. So if you look at the kind of flywheel that's possible out here, the possibilities are immense, and it allows us a starting point to go further. Now, we at Network Science do believe that it takes a village to solve problems, if not nations, and hence, not one organization can do it. We respect the fact that our enterprises have practical problems, but we also kind of bring in a portfolio of a three-dimensional capability. One, Network Science has a number of deep tech companies in its portfolio, which it works very, very closely with, and we kind of bring their capabilities to bear around how to measure things, how to assess stuff, how to get things like AR, VR, AI to kind of come back into these different efficiencies that you talked about. We also are bringing in a portfolio of solutions to be able to do it, and more importantly, a practitioner's view to this whole thing. Listen, sustainability cannot be, it's a huge transformation. It cannot be done by pure consulting, right? It has to bring in the practitioner's outlook. And importantly, what we keep discovering and what we keep emphasizing with our customers is, importantly, we need to ensure that this practitioner's expertise is multidimensional. It's not just technical, it's not just sales, it's not just finance, it's not just business. It's a combination of these things that ensures that your businesses become sustainable across all the different dimensions. So, we urge our customers and our ecosystem to think these five things. When it comes to zero cost, net zero approaches, we urge people to think interventions. It's not going to be a single long 5, 10 year transformation. That kind of, scares people out. Incidentally, it doesn't have to be. It can be a number of and a series of short-term, short time cycle implementations with measurable outcomes and savings. We call them interventions. Take them on one hand to release cost by going into the aspects of operational efficiencies that we talked about, then take deep tech as a way to accelerate and innovate on the tech capabilities that can get you to target business capabilities, right? And then put in an outcome based approach rather than just a bunch of activities. Put those outcomes in a very measurable way, and then take the multidimensional practitioner's outlook that we just talked about. And more importantly, think ecosystem. We see organizations in a non-starter mode, or heading towards failure when they just think their organization. Take a manufacturer, for example. It's not just the
Mhm.
manufacturer's headache, it's a supplier's headache and the distributor's headache and the retail outlet's headache. So think the ecosystem and see how we can get them all to the same platform. That's an important. So we urge our customers to think interventions, think deep tech for alternate business models, think outcomes, think multi-dimension across the business, and think the ecosystem. Now, just to illustrate, make this a little practical, right? It's wonderful theory, what we just talked about. But how are we doing it practically? Here is an illustration of how we are approaching this practically and how other companies which have been successfully starting this journey have achieved this. There is a whole bunch of cost reduction levers. The first aspect of the flywheel that we saw in an earlier slide, there are a
Mhm.
number of levers that you could basically get into that. There is a lot of stuff about operational efficiencies in terms of maintenance, preventive maintenance. Forget about predictive
Predictive
maintenance.
maintenance.
Preventive maintenance itself is a huge area to go with, right? And then in terms of, look at simple aspects like energy management. There is a whole bunch of energy consumption. Which are the processes that can be optimized to consume lesser energy? And then go back and say which are the areas where we can actually have better and greener energy sources, which cost you less, which emit less. And then go more towards the cost of defect prevention. Take that to the labor part of it. EHS is as important a sustainability goal, as it is to anybody else. And look at the cost of onboarding labor, cost of onboarding talent. A lot of these things gives you the dollars, releases the dollars. Look at the left blue bar and the right, orange bar. You could literally take your total cost of ownership from an X million dollars to a Y million dollars, and that X minus Y becomes your investment and your funding source for you to keep progressing on this journey. Now, we do believe that it's very important that all of this is translated to matrices and numbers. Numbers don't lie. So, giving the visibility in terms of, where do we stand in terms of assessment, giving the visibility in terms of reporting, getting the analytical models to show you the possibility. Look at the
Mhm.
different KPIs of your business, whether it's supply chain, transportation, logistics, whatever, right? Look at the risk management areas and the compliance areas. That leads us to mapping a single net zero goal, the single NZ, into multiple matrices and multiple business matrices and KPIs that helps us to report them transparently, measure that transparently, be honest to ourselves, not
Yeah.
kidding ourselves, be honest to ourselves, and ensure that the journey is kind of moved in stages from one to the other. So that's pretty much, what we think is a very practical way, and this has been our approach to our customers. We've also observed, other enterprises successfully embark on this iterative journey by
Mhm.
starting at those places that we talked about on the operational side, move them to business innovation and business capabilities, move them to, much better alternate business models, including greener business models, and ensure that that entire journey is mapped practically to an organization's financial goals, business
Mhm.
goals, and strategy. So that's pretty much how we are going about this journey. Prashant, go ahead. You want to share something?
Yes. So I'm predecessing some audience questions, but there is a thought that popped out. So you talked about taking the cost down. Who will look into the looking into the matrices, different matrices and numbers and analytics. So who are they? Who will be looking into these? Because businesses are tightened with bandwidth and different functions. So if you can
Absolutely.
just shed some light, who will be taking into consideration all of these?
Sure. Great question. Great question, Prashant. Like I said, we need to make it practical. What we've
Yeah.
seen and what we recommend, and this is something that we've seen with enterprises that we work with as well, is uh, the different roles that exist in an organization, including finance and strategy and business and sales and everything. it does require an equivalent of a sustainability officer, which
Yeah.
is co-opting the different functions. A sustainability officer or the board of a sustainability officer is not just a single function. It's a function that co-opts multiple other areas from an enterprise. For example, somebody from the CFO organization, somebody from the CTO organization, somebody from the sales organization, and so on. It becomes a panel, but then this single role and this single office is empowered to make the decisions to move the company along. And importantly, we urge that this function and this office does not live in an utopian world. It first sits with the CEO and the CFO to understand the business goals and align the journey more towards it, and hence that becomes a successful journey. So that's the answer.
Thank you. I hope with my question, everyone else and audiences will also find this useful. So yeah, move ahead. Let's move ahead,
Sure.
Madhav.
Sure, sure. So the point that you're making is, in a journey like this, it's very important for us to, drive as much transparency, as much data as possible. And hence, when, what we've seen when we work with our customers, network science brings in a lot of these capabilities. This is almost table stake when we work on this journey, and that becomes a very visible way to kind of move along the transformation. So, long story short, net zero is not a tall goal which is aligned to a corporate social responsibility. It is, but it is a consequence. And the driver is really a lot of efficiencies that one can drive, taking the opportunity of the banner of sustainability on the operations, on the businesses, on the automation, on digitization. Use deep tech as a way to envision alternate models, to break out of the way we always think, and kind of bring in a practitioner's outlook which is supported by data and reporting, and make the entire journey kind of a bunch of interventions which is mapped back to the financial goals and the business goals of the organization. In the upcoming sessions, Prashant, I'm sure the audience would be enthralled to see a couple of portfolio companies which kind of bring some of these capabilities, and a very very nice panel discussion from some of the experts who've been on top of the sustainable journeys coming up right after this. But I would like to leave the floor open for a few questions in the few minutes that we have on the clock, just to make it interactive and ensure that everybody's participating in this.
Brilliant. I think that was very insightful, and the way you touched upon from being very transparent ourselves. Let us be honest ourselves. That's, I think, a very powerful statement, and a lot of business leaders who will be uh, solving issues of sustainability. I think there is a lot of incentivization today of companies who are delving themselves into sustainability goals and activities. So I think some of the initiatives like Network Science has done, and you highlighted them. Thanks for that. Uh, so we'll be opening up for questions shortly, and I can see a few of them already popping up. So okay, let me take the first one. Uh, how do organizations strike balance between achieving net zero targets and maintaining their financial goals? I know there was a little bit of uh, eclipse, eclipsing these things. So can you just answer this between
Sure,
net
sure.
zero targets and financial goals? Yes.
Sure, sure. Now, on one hand, I want to kind of share a very practical insight out here.
Hmm.
Um, when we start to focus on the different areas where the current processes and the current operations are inefficient,
Hmm.
naturally that leads to a lot of financial outcomes. Forget about sustainability for one moment. I'll just take a very practical example. We work with fleet management and a transportation logistics company, right? And these organizations obviously work with a number of suppliers and distributors in the manufacturing industry and retail industry, right? When we look at the sources and the different types of transportation that they basically go through, these were modeled almost 15, 20, 25 years back when, for example, trucking was the biggest way to transport stuff. Now there are alternate ways which are far more greener, including the aspects of, railroad or a shipping lane, or even, better, aviation conditions, which optimizes the paths significantly higher. One may think aviation does emit, but it also cuts down the number of other aspects in terms of optimizing the supply chain itself, right? So when we basically look at these operational aspects of it, it naturally leads to financial goals taking the front stage as the driver, and the net zero goal being a consequence. When you optimize your route, you actually saved dollars and you've emitted less. The first is the driver and the second is a consequence. Similarly, we see other areas in terms of how do we optimize processes that consume time. Look at a warehouse management. What takes 7 days from the inbound to outbound, if you optimize that to, let's say, 3 days or even 2 days or even a matter of hours, it leads you to consuming so much less energy. That's
Yeah.
a direct dollar saving. So there are a number of operational efficiencies that have crept up into this industry. When we focus on that, the balance between achieving financial goal and net zero becomes more like a driver and a consequence rather than the other way around. So net zero is no longer the driver and cost savings the consequence. It's the other way around. The cost savings is the driver and you achieve net zero through it. So we do see a lot of synergies and not a lot of friction when we embark on this journey.
Yeah, I think it was very nicely explained. Like we're just flipping the perspective for now. Okay, it's a fairly long question. Bear with me.
Sure.
How can organizations ensure the implementation of gain share model? I think that was highlighted in one of your slides, which doesn't compromise with the quality and effectiveness of their products and services.
Sure, sure. Let's split this into two parts. One is the quality and of the products and the services, and then how do you achieve that through the gain share model, right? So,
Yeah.
firstly, when it comes to products and services, where the quality of the service or the quality of the product really pertains back to the way it is designed and the way it is delivered, right? So when we look at the areas of process design and the areas of process delivery or the product delivery, we do encounter a lot of areas where the design itself can be completely changed towards a sustainable business. I'll take a very small example. Even about
Yes.
till 10 years back, the phones we use, the durability of that was about 6-10 years, right? I mean, in these days it's like about 2-3 years. That durability causes an enormous stress in terms of sustainability, in terms of environment, recycling, etc. Whereas with the advent of digitalization, it's not very difficult for our control systems and for our interfaces to be far more digitized and enhance the durability by just simply changing the digital interface. But that requires a product design input. Now, if you do that, it's a better product quality, it's a better product experience. It contributes to the sustainability goals also, right? On the other hand, when you're able to service enable your products and not just sell them as products but services, deliver the services more efficiently, particularly in a digitized world, in a globally
Mhm.
digitized world, you are able to kind of optimize the delivery part of it as well as the experience part of it, both, right? And both of
Yeah.
them lead to a number of areas where you're able to increase your sales, your customer experience, and hence retention, and hence your ability to kind of keep it the quality. You plug that back into a financial model where the partner is able to invest into this product design and monetize through the services, monetize through the gains that are coming through the services. We would be able to come up with a financial model that is a little bit more geared towards gain share and risk reward kind of models, where we partake of the gains rather than kind of plugging up a lot of huge dollar investments upfront. And that's pretty much how this model is kind of set in motion.
Thank you, Madhavan. I think you answered that pretty precisely, like touching all the main factors. Another question, very interesting, is around the area of ecosystem that you mentioned. So, what are some innovations that ecosystem themselves can do to bring about this zero cost
Sure. No, that's a great question,
transportation?
Prashant, because we keep looking at organizations into their sustainability goals, into sustainable business goals, and things like that in isolation. That never works. We have to resign to the fact that we are in a globally connected world, more than ever before. And
Yeah.
if we need to achieve some of these enterprise goals, we have to factor out which of those goals are affected positively or negatively by your ecosystem. If you're a manufacturer, what is the sustainability initiatives of your supplier? What's the sustainability initiatives of your distributor? What are the fleet management and transportation options they have? How do they shelf, how do they put their goods in the shelf, and so on and so
Mhm,
forth. So,
mhm.
so it's very important for every enterprise to put them in the center, of course, but then kind of map
Yeah.
out the ecosystem and the ecosystem dependencies. Now, to your question about how can technology enable bringing them on board, thankfully, a lot of collaboration technologies, a lot of visualization technologies, and a lot of design technologies. have significantly increased two things. One is they've increased the lift shifted visibility of the design and the product ideas that are coming up. So the ecosystem gets a heads up in terms of how it's going to look like, and they can start planning about that by themselves. Second is, thanks to the advent of data and cloud, the ability of the ecosystem to come onto a common data platform to be able to share information far more effectively, track progress far more effectively, and synergize the viewpoints in terms of where are these convergence points of sustainability KPIs and matrices within the ecosystem is far more enhanced today than a decade ago, if you will, actually, right? So our ability to share the design ideas, left shift the design thinking into the ecosystem, and our ability to share data to be able to optimize not just within the enterprise but outside the enterprise, bring them onto a common platform, are all tech enabled. And I believe that's a significant step in the direction of being able to achieve sustainability goals as an ecosystem.
Sure. So I just wanted to break this down a little further, scratching the surface. Like when you say ecosystem, one is the company itself. Like you said, the example of a manufacturer, for example, they have vendors, OEMs, and other distributors, for example. And then the industry itself, the industry of telecom,
Yes.
for example. Manufacturing is an industry, oil and gas, energy, everything comes in. So can you just bifurcate it while I, as a company, can innovate in my ecosystem internally, and then from an industry perspective? So this is the last question. I just thought for the common good of
Absolutely.
others.
No, great point. Wonderful point. And, I really appreciate you for, or whoever asked this question, to bring this up. Uh, as you rightly called out, every enterprise is kind of, while they exist in an industry, their ecosystem need not exist in the same industry, right?
Yeah,
So there is an innovation and a collaboration as an enterprise with its ecosystem, and there's an innovation that people need to partake that is happening across industries. Just as an example, if you're a retailer, right? Let's say you are a Macy's or a JC Penney,
just
or
can we keep it to one example, because paucity of time, I'm apologetic. Like,
absolutely,
yeah.
yes. Absolutely, yes. Let's just take a retailer who's trying to stack the shelf. There is a source of the retail industry that's sitting in another continent. And just to
Hmm.
give you a data point, today the landfill, which is the wastage that comes out of a textile industry, is almost upwards of 12%. And there is an industry that's innovating in bringing that down to 3%. That's a sustainability goal. So when the ecosystem, when the retailer starts to choose those who are having a lower landfill, and they're enabling that innovation through their procurement means and through their supply chain means, they're not only encouraging that procurement, they're also optimizing their ecosystem. That's just one example to touch the surface. You could have a dozen examples across industries, but that's a great question, and that thinking needs to exist.
Sure. So, thank you very much, Madhavan. We have come to the end of this wonderful session. I think your insights were really helpful. I'll urge the audience to take the poll. There's a couple of questions there. If you can just give your feedback by answering those questions, and I'll just take maybe 15 seconds for that. In the meantime, I'd like to thank all the audiences from wherever they joined us. Keep tuned for the latest sessions to come. There is an amazing panel discussion, and there is a lot of other speakers who will be surely catering to your knowledge and leading us the way for sustainability. So thank you very much again, Madhavan, and all the speakers who tuned in. And get in touch with Madhavan online for the more examples and questions if you have. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Prashant. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to you. Thanks to the audience. Take
Thanks.
care.